waits for conscience. And Mara realized that pinning him cold wasn't about arrest or exposure. It was about choice. Because if he crossed that line now, the cascading orders he'd set in motion would ignite a conflict that couldn't be walked back. And as her unit moved with practiced calm, forming angles not to kill him, but to make movement impossible, the battlefield contracted to a single moment where the most powerful man present was also the most trapped, and in the chaos that followed, smoke, shouting, the thud of distant impacts. The final twist revealed itself when the general stepped deliberately into her line of sight, close enough that she could see the wear beneath his authority, and said, "Do it right?" Because stopping him meant becoming the story. And becoming the story meant accepting that heroes don't always get parades. And as the sniper unit pin stopped him cold, not with a bullet, but with resolve. The war everyone expected didn't start that day, but something else did. Something quieter and more dangerous. A reckoning that would never make headlines. And long after the dust settled and the general was escorted away under a classification that erased his name, Mara stood by her rifle again, realizing that power isn't carried by rank or weapons, but by the willingness to end a lie when it's still breathing. And if this story gripped you, if you felt that pause where history waits to see who flinches, subscribe and stay with us, because the unseen moments decide everything. And there are more you haven't heard yet. Clearly fixed the mile. If you believe power always wins and rank always protects, stop right now, because what you're about to hear shattered that lie on a frozen strip of earth where a U.S. general learned that the battlefield still answers to unseen hands, not titles. And if stories about courage, betrayal, and the moment history holds its breath matter to you, subscribe now and stay with us. Because this one doesn't blink first. The general walked by her .50 cal M82 rifle until a sniper unit pin stopped him cold. The general walked with the careless confidence of a man who had never been told no, boots crunching against gravel that still smelled faintly of cordite, the sun low enough to throw long shadows across the forward operating base as helicopters idled in the distance like bored predators. And he didn't notice the rifle at first. The massive .50 caliber M82 resting on its bipod near the sandbags, because to him it was just another tool, another asset, another piece of steel he could walk past, without consequence, unaware that the woman who owned it was watching him through reflections rather than glass, memorizing his gait the way snipers memorize wind. Because Captain Mara Vance didn't need a scope to know when the world was about to fracture, and she had learned long ago that the most dangerous men were the ones who believed the rules bent for them. Which was why when General Harlan Cross passed her rifle without a glance, dismissing it as he dismissed her unit, she felt the old tightening in her chest that came before everything went wrong, because this wasn't about ego. It was about orders buried 3 layers deep and a classified red folder that had arrived 12 hours earlier with a single line highlighted in black. Pin the asset. If command is compromised, language so cold and abstract it barely hinted that the asset was a 3-star general celebrated on cable news, a man who shook senators' hands while authorizing operations that never made it to briefing slides. And as he moved past her weapon, laughing with aides about timelines and optics, Mara remembered the first time she'd seen him years earlier when she was still a lieutenant, and he'd praised her marksmanship without ever learning her name. A small thing, but small things stack, especially when you're the one lying in the dirt while others give speeches. And now the dirt was metaphorical, but the danger was not, because her sniper unit, Pin Team Echo, wasn't deployed to kill, they were deployed to stop, to freeze, to become a question mark. The moment certainty grew too loud. And the twist was that none of them knew exactly why until the base alarms went silent all at once. Not blaring, not malfunctioning, just gone. The kind of quiet that only happens when someone upstream decides they don't want witnesses. And the general stopped mid-sentence, as if he felt it too. His smile fading as the air itself seemed to tighten, and Mara's hand brushed the receiver of her rifle, not to raise it, but to acknowledge it, like greeting an old ally. Because somewhere beyond the perimeter a convoy had deviated, a drone feed had looped, and a signature that shouldn't exist had lit up on her tablet for half a second before vanishing. And suddenly the idea that the general was simply arrogant no longer fit, because arrogant men don't kill their own eyes and ears. And the first twist snapped into place when her comms crackled with a voice she hadn't heard in years, her former spotter, presumed dead, saying only Pin is green, which meant authorization had come from somewhere above even the general, a ghost chain of command that existed solely for moments like this. And as General Cross turned slowly, his gaze landing finally on the rifle, On her, on the quiet readiness of a unit that wasn't in his briefing book. The second twist unfolded. He wasn't surprised. He was relieved. And that realization hit Mara harder than recoil. Because relief meant guilt, and guilt meant the story everyone knew was wrong. And he raised his hands not in surrender, but in resignation, saying softly that he'd wondered which team they'd send, that he'd hoped it would be hers because she was precise, because she wouldn't miss the truth. And in that instant, the base became a stage where decades of classified decisions converged, because the general confessed, not to treason in the simple sense, but to something worse. Sanctioned betrayal, the kind that starts as necessity and hardens into habit, where threats are manufactured to justify budgets, where wars are prolonged to maintain balance, where snipers like her are both shield and sword. And the reason he'd walked past her rifle was because he needed to know if she'd still stop him anyway. And the third twist cut deeper when enemy fire cracked from beyond the wire, not chaotic but disciplined, probing, testing. And the general laughed once, a dry sound, saying that was the cost of delay, that the machine never